What would prompt somebody to want to do this?
Just to see if it could be done. Hello, everyone. I'm Steve.
And I'm Scott.
Welcome back. Thank you for joining us together. We're Backyard Musings, broadcasting live, Apple Valley, California.
Yep, science and technology. That's what we talk about here.
Vikings likely sailed farther offshore, navigating by stories. I don't know how you can do that. In island harbors. Jarrett's voyages show, this guy named Jarrett.
Greer Jarrett.
Yeah. Show the boat's stability and the value of teamwork. Archaeologist Greer Jarrett from Lund University in Sweden has spent the past 3 years, probably with Greta Thunberg, right? Sailing along routes once used by the Vikings. His findings show that the Vikings likely sailed much farther from Scandinavia and farther from the coast than previously believed. In his latest study, he presents evidence of a decentralized network of ports located on islands and peninsulas, which likely played a key role in Viking trade and travel. This research was published on the 8th of May, 2025 in Journal of Archaeological Method and Theory. Would you like to know more?
You think this guy was a descendant?
Oh, yeah. He's from Sweden, definitely. Kjersti's Viking.
Okay. The sailing boat, an open square-rigged clinker vessel modeled after those used during the Viking Age, which was 800 to 1050 AD, made a journey from Trondheim to the Arctic Circle and back in 2022. Since then, Jarrett and his team have sailed more than 5,000 kilometers, which is what, about 2,500 miles or so?
3,000.
3,000?
Yeah,
oh, okay. Along historic Viking trade routes. His research suggests that Viking voyages often took place well offshore, challenging earlier assumptions about their navigation methods.
Well, they found Iceland, so that was...
So these guys
that wasn't offshore.
Yeah, these guys were men, right? These guys were burly.
The men were men and the women were men.
Burly guys.
Shield maidens.
So you thinking that they stayed within sight of the shore?
Well, they didn't want Thor to strike them with their hammer or sea animals grab them, right?
Yeah, but when they told their wives and their family, hey, we're leaving on a voyage, we're going to be gone for a year.
6 weeks, a couple months.
They didn't just go offshore.
Well, they followed the shore.
Like maybe cruise ship.
Maybe they followed the shore.
These guys were adventurers. They were, like you said, they were men's men.
Quote, I can show that this type of boat sails well on open water in tough conditions, but navigating close to land and in the fjords sometimes presents challenges that are just as great, but not as obvious. Underwater currents and katabatic winds blowing down from mountain slopes, for example, says Greer Jarrett, a doctoral student in archaeology at Lund University.
Jarrett's research trips have involved real risks. When the yard that supported the mainsail broke off the coast of Norway, now I wonder how far off the coast they were, the crew had to improvise to avoid a dangerous situation. Quote, the cold in the Lofoten Islands was a challenge. Our hands really suffered. At that point, I realized just how crucial it is to have a good crew. And probably some gloves, right?
Yeah.
Says Greer Jarrett.
Jarrett has also tested the boat on open water, sailing in both the Kattegat and the Baltic Sea. Although the boat lacks a deep draught keel, he says it remains surprisingly stable. In an earlier study, Jarrett and his colleagues showed that during the Middle Ages, Greenlanders could use this type of boat to reach remote areas of the Arctic in search of walrus tusks. Weren't Greenlanders Vikings from Sweden?
Maybe they didn't consider that.
Denmark, maybe?
Yeah, maybe they had their own name. I don't know. To trace specific Viking routes, Jarrett interviewed sailors and fishermen about the traditional routes used in the 19th and earlier 20th centuries when engine-free sailing boats were still widely used in Norway. Quote, I use the experience of my own journeys and the sailors' traditional knowledge to reconstruct possible Viking age sailing routes.
The Vikings did not navigate by map, compass, or sextant. Instead, they used mental maps where memories and experiences played a crucial role, like the Pacific Islanders, kind of.
Yeah.
They also used myths linked to various coastal landmarks. Quote, examples include Viking stories about the islands Torgaten, Hestmona and Skrova off the Norwegian coast. The stories serve to remind sailors of the dangers surrounding these places or of their importance as navigation marks.
These preserved myths are the last remnants of what must once have been a landscape steeped in stories. Jarrett calls this a maritime cultural mindscape. Small islets, skerries, and reefs were all part of a web of stories that helped the Vikings navigate through the landscape and that were passed down through generations of seafarers.
Through a combination of direct experience and the characteristics of the boats and digital reconstruction of what the landscape looked like in the Viking Age, Jarrett has identified 4 possible Viking harbors along the Norwegian coast in his latest publication. The locations of these ports, Jarrett calls them havens, are farther out to sea than the major ports and hubs known to date.
Quote, with this type of boat, it has to be easy to get in and get out of the harbor in all possible wind conditions. There must be several routes in and out. Shallow bays are not an issue because of the shallow draft of the boats. Getting far up the narrow fjords, however, is tricky. They are difficult to sail upwind with a square rig, and the boats are sensitive to katabatic winds. Jarrett's hypothesis is like during the Viking Age, such small, easily accessible harbors abounded, places where sailors could pause, rest, and meet other seafarers.
Yeah, go into the pub and have a drink and skull.
Yep, raise their P's and Q's, right?
Yeah. Quote, a lot of time we only know about the starting and ending points of the trade that took place during the Viking Age. Major ports such as Bergen and Trondheim in Norway, Ribe in Denmark, and Dublin in Ireland. The thing I'm interested in is what happened on the journeys between these major trading centers. My hypothesis is that this decentralized network of ports, located on small islands and peninsulas, was central to making trade efficient during the Viking Age.
Jarrett's research trips have faced a few challenges. On their way back from Lofoten in May of 2022, the yard, which is the mast spar, holding up the mainsail, broke as they sailed through the middle of Vestfjorden. The accident happened with the vessel 25 kilometers out to sea.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah. We had to lash 2 oars together at least they knew how to lash, right? To hold the sail and hope that it would hold. We made it back to the harbor safely, but then we had to spend several days repairing the boat before we could sail again. Quote, on another trip, a minke whale suddenly surfaced and flapped its huge tail fin just meters from the boat.
Probably a sign from Thor. You guys are doing good.
Get out of my hood.
Jarrett's adventures have also highlighted how important relationships must have been during the Viking voyages. Quote, you need a boat that can withstand all kinds of weather conditions, but if you don't have a crew that can cooperate and put up with each other for long periods, these journeys will probably be impossible, Jarrett concludes. Sometimes you might have to thump them on the head, too, if they're not listening.
Well, everybody's got to have a job to do, right?
Yeah.
So, and if you're not doing it, you're going to probably get
eaten or thrown overboard.
Yeah.
Well, it's a fish with you. All right, folks. Thanks for joining us about our Viking tales.
Take care, everyone. Thanks. Yeah, then somebody else